Hello, my wonderful students. Today we're going to be going over how to figure out, we're going to be doing the final part of our house project. We're going to be figuring out how much our house would cost. How much would it cost to sell our house in Middletown? Maybe how much it'll cost to sell our house in Manhattan? How much money do we maybe need to have to buy this house? So to do that, we need to figure out a few things first. We need to figure out how big our scale model of our house, how big that model would be in the actual world. Like, so how big the actual house would be. So to figure out how big our actual house would be, all we need is to figure out the scalar value that scales our model, our model house that we've been working on. There's some number, because it's a scale model, there's some number that we can multiply the length, width, and height of our model. We can multiply all those numbers by some number to get the size of our actual house. What we want to do today is find that number. We want to find the number that lets us scale our house up to the size of an actual house. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. So let's figure out how to do that. So everyone should open up. They should go to the classroom and they should open up the assignment that says house projects, scale, and measurements. We're going to be working in these slides first, and then we have another set of slides for this lesson. So finding the scale of our modern home. Everyone should get to this slide. Once you're on this slide, you should also open up a version of your house that doesn't have a roof so that we could see inside of it. We're going to need to measure the inside, and we don't have to be perfectly precise with measuring the inside, but we need to have a version of our house that we could open up from the inside. So I'm going to give everyone a minute to, actually I lied to you, this is a video, so you can actually pause it and open up your house on Tinkercad. So I'm going to do that. I found my file. It's called House Interior. I'm going to open that up in Tinkercad, and it's going to take a second to load. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to find a Blankie that's a pretty reasonable size for a house. Like a Blankie that would be a person living in this house, not some gargantuan Blankie that's going to, shatter, destroy the floor just by walking around or like bash his head on the roof. We just want a normal sized Blankie. So I'm going to go to characters. I'm going to go to characters and I'm going to bring in a Blankie. And the default one is going to be way too big. So this Blankie wouldn't fit through my door. He wouldn't be able to sit on any of these tables. So I need to scale him down. So I scaled down my Blankie. So this guy would be able to walk through my doors. He seems a little big. He's bigger than a fridge right now. Maybe I'll scale him down even more. Does this seem reasonable? He's still probably almost as big as this fridge. It looks like he'd barely get through these smaller doors. Maybe he should be a little bit smaller. That looks fine. Looks like he'd be able to sit. And by the way, these Blankies aren't perfectly proportionate to a normal person, so you might want to keep that in mind when scaling him. He's never really going to fit perfectly because his head is actually bigger than his body, which doesn't really make sense when it comes to normal people. Maybe I'll make him a little bit taller. All right, this looks good. So he's still not perfectly proportionate, but this is about the size of a person living in this house. This is about the size that we would want. So let's go check the slides now, and let's see what it says to do next. So step 2, create a Blankie that's a reasonable size for your house. Blankies are not exactly proportional to humans, but it should be close enough. It should be a little taller than sinks and counters. Yep. He should be definitely taller than chairs and couches. Yep, my guy does that. He's a little taller than that. He should be a little shorter than the fridge. That makes sense. A little shorter than the doors. Okay, perfect. So this Blankie looks like he's pretty reasonably sized to a person that would actually live in this house. So let's move on to the next step. Measure the height of your Blankie. Once you get the Blankie that's a reasonable height, we're going to find the actual height. We're going to find the actual height of that Blankie in millimeters and inches. So first, let's measure the Blankie in millimeters because that's the default setting. So by default, if we go to edit, by default our units would be in millimeters. So I see that my Blankie is 22.2 millimeters. You guys might have a different size Blankie. My original Blankie was 18 millimeters. Just for the sake of making things easy, I'm going to have this be the same size. It's going to be 18 millimeters. So my Blankie is 18 millimeters tall. So you guys would measure your Blankie. It might be a different size because you have different houses than me at different scales. You would type in my Blankie is 18 millimeters tall. Or if you had a different size Blankie For example, if your whole house was at a larger scale than mine, maybe your blankie would be a larger size. So I just scaled up everything. So now my blankie is 23.42 millimeters tall. So I would write out, if your blankie that is a reasonable size is 22 millimeters, that's what you write. So you're just making a blankie in your house. He should be about the right size. He should make sense. And you're finding his height. And that's what you put here. So you should put that number here now. I'll give you an extra second to do that. Keep in mind, though, you can pause the video and give yourself these extra seconds. You should now have a number typed in here for the height of your blankie. So we can move on to the next slide. Move on. Now we want to find his height in inches. A lot of times in America, anytime you're measuring a house, you're going to be measuring it in square feet, in inches, in square feet and inches. You're not going to be measuring in millimeters. So we should convert our units. Let's convert our units. I'm actually going to scale my house back down first. We can convert our units by clicking Edit Grid, and we can change our units to inches. So again, I clicked this Edit Grid button at the bottom right. I went to units, and I changed them to inches. And now I can see how tall my character is, and he's 0.709 inches tall. So I would write down 0.709. Again, your blankie is going to be a different size in inches. So you should take time right now to figure out how big your blankie is in inches. Assuming people pause the video, you should now have this filled out. You should know the size of your blankie in inches, so we can move on to the next slide. Please fill this out. You're getting graded on these. Anything in red is what you're getting graded on. The average height of a person is around 5'6". That means the average person is 66 inches tall. Whatever value scales our blankie up to the size of a regular person is going to be the same value to scale our house up to the size of a regular house. Again, a regular person is 66 inches tall. Whatever value is going to scale our test blankies, the ones that we're using to figure out how big our house is, whatever scales that blankie up to the size of a normal person, that's going to be the same value to scale our house up to the size of a normal house, because the blankie and the house are proportionate to each other. So for example, if you find out that your blankie is 1 inch tall and a regular person is 66 inches tall, then that means that your scalar value, the value that you have to multiply all of this blankie's dimensions by, would be 66. Meaning that the life-size version would be 66 times bigger. If a blankie is 1 inch, it needs to be 66 times bigger to be 66 inches tall. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. If not, you should make sure to rewatch that. Make sure you kind of understand what we're talking about. But the gist of it is that there's some number that we have to multiply the size of our blankie for to get a real life-size blankie. And for the sake of simplifying things, we're going to say that that number, we have to get our blankie to 66 inches tall. So we have to figure out the number to multiply our blankie's height by to make him 66 inches tall. All right, so let's do that now. So we have to figure out that scalar value. So you should type in the size of your blankie. So in this red, this is what you're filling out. My blankie is something inches tall. This is a number you already found back here. You could plug that in. An average person is 66 inches tall. I would have to multiply my blankie's height by some number to make it 66 inches tall. So if your blankie was, let's say 3 inches tall, then you would have to multiply your blankie's height by, I want to say 22. Yeah, 22. You'd have to make it 22 times bigger to make it 66 inches tall. That would mean that your scalar value, the value that you have to multiply your dimensions by to scale them up proportionately, your scalar value would be 22. That number is not going to change unless you change the size of your project. So Mr. M's house, in my original example, using my original numbers, was a 93 to 1 scale model. That means that the real house is 93 times bigger than my scale model. I get this number because 93 is my scalar value. 93 is Mr. M's scalar value. So what you're doing is you're plugging in your scalar value that you found right here into this value right here. Hopefully you could do each of these steps. If you're confused about them, go back, watch that part of the video again, listen to my explanation, and try to think about what I did. If you have a hard time with this, I know this is a challenging assignment. Please just shoot me an email and tell me what part you're stuck on and what numbers you have. Maybe we can, meet at some point and discuss exactly what to do, what you're stuck at. But everyone should finish with some scalar value. And I would assume, based on the size that we're working with in Tinkercad, that your number would probably be between, 50 and maybe 200 would be a relatively decent scale. Would probably make sense. But I could be wrong. Should be around there, though. And the only person getting 50 that I could think of, or anyone close to that, is probably maybe a second period student had a really, really large scale model that might not need to be scaled up as much. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling now. Hopefully everyone's been able to finish this. Please, again, shoot me an email if you haven't. And that's going to be it for this one. Hopefully everyone should know the scalar value that they need to size up their house. They should know the scale of their scale model. Hopefully everyone should be able to figure that out right now. And we're also going to be doing this in class. So if you see this video a little early, don't get stressed out about it. We're doing this in class on Monday, December 21st.